didn't mention it to those of you who are viewing from home and participating virtually, but you can put your joys or concerns that you want to share into the comments below the video at any time. We'll place a stone in the water for those joys and concerns you have today. I was going to mention it before we started, and there was such laughter about the Mother's Day comment that it just slipped right out of my mind. But we had in our adult RE today, we were talking about loving kindness meditation and wishing loving kindness for other people, and it is so gratifying for me to look out and see you doing that for those who are coming up here with their stones, that your eyes are on them and that your intention, hopefully, is on expressing loving kindness and care to those who come forward. So a stone for acknowledging that loving kindness in our community. And one final stone for all of those joys or concerns that are not yet ready to be acknowledged.
And now with more words from the Reverend Dr. Sofia Betancourt, who wrote, "We are the theological inheritors of teachings on universal salvation. There is no winnowing out of the supposedly unworthy that can be named sacred among us. It is our very universalism that is at stake when we turn away from the impact that our institutions have on the same communities and groups that society encourages us to dehumanize and make small." And she goes on to write, "The good news is that we are in control of what we do with our daily living period. If we, each one of us, represent a missing remnant in the fabric of our collective future, then together we can lean into a possibility that we have yet to fully experience in human history, a collective wholeness, an unassailable good. That is the kind of salvation I am here to fight for in the small moments of every single day." As the world continues to be, at times, an unsettled and unsettling place, we look to work with those in need as they are forced to find new places to live their lives. Today's offering recipient is the Refugee Response of Cleveland. The Refugee Response empowers resettled families to grow roots, supporting them in becoming engaged, self-sufficient, and contributing members of their new communities. From youth and teen mentoring to job training and placement, the Refugee Response works to empower the refugee community to become settled in Cleveland and to become vibrant members of their new community. Efforts include the Ohio City Farm, one of the largest and most productive urban farms in the nation that welcomes thousands of visitors each year and stands as a successful model for mission-driven businesses. Your contribution today will go toward helping Refugee Response continue to meet their mission of welcoming and accepting new members into our greater Cleveland community. You're welcome to put your offering in the collection plates. We also invite you to donate by way of our Cash App handle, UUCC 44122, which can be found in your order of service. Please designate the donation for the Refugee Response. Please give generously, but within your means.
Our offertory music today is Busca el Amor, and if you're not a Spanish speaker and you'd like to know what the song is all about, it is number 1004 in the Teal book, and there's a translation on the last page of that song. Revisa tu corazón para hallar el amor en un rincón, pero busca el amor, ni placer ni pasión, el amor, lo que hace al otro bien, busca el amor en ti, se multiplica si lo repartís, busca el amor en ti, solo que alma puede ser feliz, busca el amor en ti, se multiplica si lo repartís, busca el amor en ti, solo que alma puede ser feliz, busca el amor en ti, en ti.
Reggi tu camaleón, cuando cambia el color del corazón y atesta la flor, un pétalo del sol, el amor, lo que hace al otro bien, busca el amor en ti, se multiplica si lo repartís, busca el amor en ti, solo que alma puede ser feliz, busca el amor en ti, se multiplica si lo repartís, busca el amor en ti, solo el que alma puede ser feliz, busca el amor en ti, en ti.
Thank you. You know, part of what we do when we take up our offering on Sunday morning is build relationship. And it may not look that way, but we are reaching out and connecting with organizations in our community that stand for the same things that we stand for. And so we are building a bridge through our resources in terms of how we connect with other people in our community and across the world as it happens, because we have a church in Burundi, Africa that we are connected with because of our generosity, and I am in regular communication with them. I wish you could see some of the communications about the stuff that they are doing there, laying a foundation and building a new facility because of our generosity and helping them pay their rent for this year so they have space to do that. So perhaps the organizations that we support today are going to be places where you want to devote some other time and energy. But for now, I invite you to read along with the acceptance of gifts, which is on your yellow pew card. We offer these gifts with gratitude, and we acknowledge the constant gifts of time, talent, and treasure that strengthen and nourish this congregation as a reflection of our commitment to community within and without, our purposeful spirituality that is ever searching and growing, and our intentional actions that lead to greater justice in our congregation, our city, our nation, and our world. I'm wondering if any of you have ever played a game called Balderdash. A few people, okay. So in this game, we're going to do a little variation of it today because I'm not confident that anybody is going to know the actual meanings to any of these words. But we're going to try. And so I'm going to say a word that is not really part of my common vernacular, and maybe it's part of yours, but I'll say a couple of words, and then you can tell me what you think that word means. And I am going to be preferentially choosing some of the younger people that may have some thoughts about these words if they would like to share, but I'm not going to be exclusive to them. Okay, so young people, you get the mic first if you have a thought. Here's the first one. What do you think it means? Well, let me just say the word. What do you think the word squamous means? What is squamous? Any thoughts? Somebody says they think they know. You think you have a thought?
It's a kind of cell. It's a kind of cell in your body. Like
It's a kind of cell, a squamous cell, okay. What does squamous mean, though?
Okay, this is going to be really bad.
Use the mic so everybody at
really
home hears you,
honestly
too.
thought SpongeBob SquarePants, because you went with a younger.
Okay, so something.
It's squeaky. It's squeamish.
Okay, squamous, something like SpongeBob SquarePants. Under the sea, okay. I got it. I saw a hand somewhere. Over here, if we can pass the mic down.
I've usually heard it in the context of cancer.
Okay, in the context of cancer, and Mike had a thought.
I thought it sounded like a shy Irishman.
A shy Irishman. Squamous. So it gets used in medical terms in talking about cells, but squamous actually means covered with scales. So if you, in the wintertime, you may feel a bit squamous here if your skin is a bit dry. You may feel a little scalier than you want to be. Squamous, covered by scales. But, so speaking of Ireland, as long as we brought up Irish, what do you think a craw thumper is? A craw thumper.
A deformed crow.
A craw thumper is a deformed crow. Any other thoughts? I'm looking. Okay, I'm going to come to you in just a minute. Tad?
A mallet for hitting crayfish.
A mallet for hitting crayfish. It's a craw thumper.
I just wanted to say that I'm out of this game because your words are better than a crossword puzzle person.
Oh, okay.
So.
She's out. Kay, will you pass this down to Mike? Where's there a young person? Oh, I'll come right to you.
I'm young. It's a cage that you use to put around the cucumber plants in the garden.
A cage to put around the cucumber plants in the garden, a craw thumper. And up here we've got...
I thought it might be like an exotic Irish bug because you said it was similar to Ireland.
I did say something about Ireland, didn't I? Yeah, so an exotic Irish bug. A craw thumper It's an Irish word for someone who is over-the-top pious. And a like over-the-top pious person is a craw thumper, like in your face, kind of way overboard. Okay. Okay, you want a really fun one? What do you think a vomitory is? A vomitory. Oh, hand shot up immediately over here.
A vomitory is a place where people who had competed in Roman times to throw up when they were stressed out and challenged about the battle.
Okay. A place where Roman people, when they were stressed out about their battle, they would go and throw up in the vomitory. Can you pass this down over here?
She's right that it's Latin,
Okay.
but it was the place that you would enter the Colosseum, I believe, to view the action.
Okay, the place where
before you vomited.
Enter the Colosseum, okay? The entrance. Okay, you've got some over here. No young people want in on the vomitory? Really? Really? Okay. Here's a young person, Judy.
Yeah, I'm really young. The truth is, it was my flight on a lot of turbulence. But no, it's actually close but no cigar, as my memory serves. When the Romans would overindulge in food, then they would go to another room and vomit so that they could overindulge again.
Okay, so the room where you go so you can overindulge, and then we've got...
No, so you could throw up so that...
So you could throw up so that you can overindulge. We're getting really great answers.
Whoever made reference over there to the Roman Colosseum was on target, but it applies to contemporary stadiums. If you go in a contemporary stadium today, the entrance is called a vomitory.
All right. So the definition that I had, and I'm not going to compete with anybody that's got ancient Roman knowledge, but the definition I had was just that it's an exit. That a vomitory is the place where you exit. That's the, where presumably people would vomit out of the Colosseum. But your answers may well be very correct. Do we have enough time for one more? Are you willing to tolerate one more? I have to be able to say it, though. What is batrachomyomachy? Batrachomyomachy. What is batrachomyomachy? I'm going to say it enough times that I can say it for the rest of my life. Yes, yes, yes. Batrachomyomachy.
It sounds like something that my toddler brought home from daycare.
Something your daughter
I'm not sure
brought...
which week it was, but sometime this year.
Sometime this year, your daughter brought home batrachomyomachy from daycare. Yes. Abs, you've got...
A sickness.
A sickness, okay. And then another possibility?
I think it could be like a dinosaur or
A
something.
trachomyomachy is a dinosaur. A very special, Rachel.
I think it's battle among frogs.
Battle among frogs. Batrachomyomachy. You go out into the swamps and you witness some incredible batrachomyomachy.
I think it's a machine to measure amounts of bacteria.
Machine that measures the amount of bacteria, the batrachomyomachy machine. Any other thoughts? You're looking like, no, okay, all right, I'm not going to embarrass you, that's fine. One more, Tad.
I'm going to say it's the study of raising and breeding camels.
Raising and breeding camels. Batrachomyomachy. So here's the answer that I had. Again, not promising anything about the accuracy of my answers. They came from the internet, so they have to be dubious at best. Batrachomyomachy, making a mountain out of a molehill. So maybe Unitarian Universalists engage in a bit of batrachomyomachy from time to time. There are some words that we avoid, not just don't use, though. There are some words that we avoid in Unitarian Universalist churches sometimes, and they're in the category of spiritual words. In fact, I think it's on this other page that I had, I wonder what you thought when you heard Sofia Betancourt's words about being on a journey toward redemption, and that we have lived with one another in a sense of the promise of our salvation. They're kind of strange words to come out of the mouth of a Unitarian Universalist. And we've had some interesting words in our service today. Thula Klizeo, Nala Pasakaya. Be still my heart, even here I am at home. Maybe those are difficult words for some of us to say, to feel at home someplace. I did not feel at home the first time I went to a Unitarian Universalist church. I went in with my atheist mindset, ready to go to a place where I would feel comfortable and at home. I went in kind of hoping for that. And then I opened up the hymnal for this song that we're singing, and we're singing about God. And somebody said, well, how did you like the service today? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm kind of over God. I don't know that I like singing songs about God. And they said, I've told some of you this before, they said, oh, don't worry about that. Just make that word mean whatever you want it to mean. Which is fine if it didn't have any meaning before, but it had a meaning for me already, and it was not a meaning that I was comfortable embracing. So it was a lot of work for me to make that word mean something that I could embrace, rather than something that I needed to reject from an earlier time in my life. Make that word mean whatever you want it to mean is not as easy as it sounds. But you know, our Unitarian Universalist forebears, both sides, used to embrace the concept of God, but our theology has evolved and our theological language has also evolved. That's kind of part of our legacy as Unitarian Universalists. We have not held on to the same ideas and the same language for thousands of years. Over a pretty short period of time, we've evolved and grown and embraced new ways of expressing our theologies. Our Unitarian forebears used to say that God is just, there's one God. That's what made them Unitarian. There wasn't a Trinity, there's just one God, which meant that a lot of the language surrounding Jesus changed as a result. They weren't speaking in terms of a Trinity or in terms of Jesus' divinity, and it also meant that language from other religious traditions could be embraced as long as it was supporting that idea of there being one God. Our Universalist forebears said that everybody gets saved. Everyone gets to go to heaven. And that's a different theological understanding of words like redemption and salvation than what the Calvinists at the time had. We have been, for a long time, free to define spiritual language in a way that fits our theologies. That's part of our heritage. But there is some language that we say, no thank you. I don't want to pay attention to that word. And maybe some of us didn't grow up with it. And so we just assume that any spiritual language we hear, we assume that it means the things that other people say it means, and that we're not free to put our own definition on it. And so we hear the way that they say what God means, or what redemption means, or what salvation means, and we say no thank you. But we're saying no thank you to their definition without giving it a whole lot of thought. Some of us grew up with those words, though, and we've experienced some pain and some trauma in other religious spaces, and it's a lot of work for us to unpack it and disentangle those experiences from the words that were used in those places. That was my experience coming out of the Christian church. I had to do a lot of work. It wasn't just figuring out what a word means, it's figuring out all the things that that word could no longer mean for me. As Unitarian Universalists, we actually have the freedom to explore what words might mean for us personally. We have the freedom to define religious terminology in a way that makes sense with our own theologies, our own views of the world. And not only that, we might have a responsibility in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We might have a responsibility to understand what other people mean by that language, what Reverend Betancourt means by that language when she uses it, instead of saying, I don't believe in redemption, I don't believe in salvation, that's not a thing for me, I'm just going to tune everything out. Maybe that's not being responsible with how we listen to other people's language. If we reject what somebody says just because we don't like their choice of words, we might not be listening with compassionate ears. We might not be listening in a way that welcomes one another wherever people happen to be in that moment. As I say this, I'm thinking of our principles, the promises that we've already made to one another that say we affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in our relationships, and that we welcome one another and encourage one another to grow spiritually in our congregations. So what are some words that are really out of place in a Unitarian Universalist setting? Sin, there's a good one. We don't really talk about sin very much as Unitarian Universalists, and when we do, Unitarian Universalists are the first ones to point out that sin is an archery term, and it just means that you missed the mark. How many times have you or a UU next to you said that about the word sin? You don't have to raise your hand, but I saw. I took it in. I like letting people raise their hand first before I tell you that you don't have to raise your hand, because it's just more fun that way. Of course, that's true. Sin is an archery term, and it means that we missed the mark. When we sinned, it means that we did not hit the target in the way that we were hoping to. And that doesn't really sound like such a bad thing. In a lot of other circles, maybe it means that we have failed God in some way. We have sinned. We have missed the mark in some way with what God expected of us, maybe how we interpret it. But if it really just means to miss the mark, we have set some pretty lofty targets for ourselves as Unitarian Universalists. We have not only made kind of a small bullseye, we have put it way at the far end of the field, and we might not always be aiming very well when we take a shot. So if we want to, we could embrace that word and say, oh man, I sinned today. I said I was going to honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and I missed that mark. What can I do about that? Well, I can try again tomorrow. I can realign myself with that promise that I made and say, let me re-aim at that target to honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person. There's no shame in that. There's no condemnation. I'm not going to a bad place just because I sinned. I just missed the mark, and I do it every day. I do. Maybe you have a better track record than me, but it just means I promised to do one thing, and I didn't do that thing the way that I said I would. I sinned. That doesn't seem so bad. Now, for some of us, it takes a lot of work to unpack what that word used to mean in order to even consider a new definition of it. But we could, as Unitarian Universalists, we could embrace that. We could understand if somebody says that racism is a sin. We can understand that. We can say that behavior, that practice, that system is something that does not align with our principles. It's something that misses the mark of the vision that we cast for the world. It's sinful. Okay, so let's do something about it. Let's realign ourselves. Let's realign the systems that we participate in so that we do a better job at hitting the mark. It means that we have a chance to repent. There's another word you don't hear in Unitarian Universalist churches very often. We have a chance to repent, which means we turn around. So I've sinned. I made a promise to honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I failed to do that, and so now I'm going to repent. I say it like that because we think of it in a very lofty way. When you repent, that's a high church kind of word. But it just really means, I'm going to try again. I'm going to take another stab at that. Let's see how I do tomorrow with honoring the inherent worth and dignity of every person. It can mean that. You might not want it to mean that, and that's okay. But the possibility exists. What's another word that we don't really use a lot in UU circles? Predestination. Which is funny, because as I was mentioning about our Universalist forebears, they were fighting against the Calvinists who said, you do not have a choice. You are either going to heaven or you're going to hell, and it's already been decided. You are predestined. And if any of you have watched the Marvel series Moon Knight, then you know that the Egyptians also had a version of predestination. We may not have as many Marvel people here today, but predestination, you're judged before you even get to the finish line because somebody knows where you're headed. But the funny thing is, our universalist side said, okay, fine. You want predestination? This is what it is. Everyone is predestined to go to heaven. Everybody gets in the gate. That's done. Problem solved. Question answered. Let's move on. And maybe predestination for us is a way of saying everyone has inherent worth and dignity. Or it's a way of saying everyone is worthy of belonging and love. It's a way of saying, I don't have to guess about you. I don't have to wonder about you. I don't have to weigh you on any sort of scale in my mind. I know you are predestined to be worthy of love and acceptance and belonging. How does that feel? Doesn't feel like our old definition of predestination. Got another one? Dogma, I hear that. Hate. Oh, fate. Hate. You said hate. You said faith. Okay. Guilt. Yes? And right. So guilt figures into that whole package too. And here's what I would say about that. This is not from a theology class anywhere, but my way of distinguishing those, when I feel guilt about something, it's because I have missed the mark somehow. I have betrayed myself in a way. I've given my word to something, and I haven't followed through with integrity, and I feel guilty about that because I haven't lived up to what I said I would do. And that prompts me to do something differently. When I feel shame about it, I take that and turn it into being about me. It's not just that I didn't do what I said I would do, but now it means I'm a bad person and I'm unworthy. That's what shame feels like to me. So I've got no use for shame. But guilt might prompt me to correct something, to go mend something in a relationship, to try better the next day. It might be something that I can use in my life and let it be a way that I talk to myself and say, that's not cool, Randy. You said you would do this thing. You need to fix it in whatever way you can. Make amends. Fate is a thing that we don't use a lot in UU circles. That's a lot like predestination. Our universalist folks might say that everyone's fated to go to heaven. One of the weird things about inherent worth and dignity, though, and this encouragement to spiritual growth, to me it means we always have potential. We always have the possibility of doing something different tomorrow. I am not destined to do the same thing today that I did yesterday. So I don't know how I would reinterpret the word fate, aside from saying that if I don't do anything different, maybe I'm operating on rails. Maybe I'm on autopilot and just not thinking about what I do and just reacting in life. And that can be scary. I don't want that. I want to take responsibility for what I can do in my life. Which is why I think it's interesting that Sofia Betancourt talks about redemption and salvation. Because in our theological language, we don't talk about it very much. And we don't necessarily like those words because we don't know what we're being saved from. What are we being saved from when we talk about salvation? And maybe it's that sense of just doing the same thing that we have always done and creating the same problems that we have always created. Maybe that's what we need to be saved from. And maybe the path toward doing that is being intentional about the commitments that we make as Unitarian Universalists. Maybe the way that we live is our salvation. Maybe our commitment to our Unitarian Universalist values is what redeems us from that sense of fate, that sense of always doing the same thing that we've always done and getting the same results. Maybe salvation is about refocusing ourselves, repenting when we sin, refocusing ourselves and saying, I can do better. And maybe if we're all doing that together, we have a chance at a journey toward redemption. I don't even know what that means in your head right now. but the possibility exists for it to mean something. And it might be a lot of work. For you, I don't know what your history is. I don't know what your background is. I don't know what baggage you're carrying into this room about redemption and sin and salvation and all of that stuff. But when I hear it out of the mouth of Sofia Betancourt, I say, what does she mean by that? Because there's a part of me that just wants to say, no, thank you. I'm glad that there's a part of me that's still curious. By fully accepting our own inherent worth and dignity, maybe we can live in a way that creates greater wholeness and well-being, and maybe that is redemption or salvation. And a lot of us may not worry about an afterlife anymore. We may not worry about whether we're going to heaven or not, but we worry about a lot of other things. A lot of other things that get in the way of us creating greater wholeness and well-being in the world. So maybe our potential to reclaim and redefine some spiritual language in a personally meaningful way opens space for us to live with deeper integrity to our guiding principles and not let all of those little worries stand in the way of us being who we claim to be as Unitarian Universalists. It is challenging work, and it is best done together. May we be so bold to engage in that work and to encourage one another toward integrity and salvation, dare I say it. This is the song that requires a little instruction, right? Okay, so we're going to sing a song. It is number 1016 in the teal hymnal. We're going to sing the verses in English and the chorus in Spanish. The chorus is going to be Profetiza Pueblo Mío, but the verses we're going to sing in English. That's all the instruction we need. Let's rise in body or spirit as we sing together. Go ahead and be seated. We've got a lot of things happening, and I want to make sure we get to them all. I know that someone is going to mention something about the auction. So I'll remind you as that person is approaching, Sue McKim's Celebration of Life will be Friday, May 20th at 5 p.m. And I hope you're all able to be here to celebrate her. And this is the auction secret agent, it looks like.
I am not the Bond character. I am Klizeo. Inspector Klizeo. I am seeking auction, donations, and volunteers. May 21st. Be there.
You can email Sharon Edmund if you have donations or if you would like to volunteer for this year's auction. I'm not going to try to give any other announcements over at Pink Panther and Snappy. So, as I invite Valerie forward for a brief testimonial, I just want to mention to you that the grass is beginning to grow a little bit in our lawn, and our building and grounds team and our Ministry for Earth have a new plan, and we're going to try to let the grass grow a little taller now so that we have a little more insect life and we have more thriving ecosystem in our lawns. So I just want to let you know, nobody is slacking off. This is all intentional. We can appreciate a little more beauty as the wildflowers bloom and all of that sort of thing on our lawn, and I just wanted you to be aware. Also, the banners out front are being rehung, so any of you that were disturbed by the banners getting blown down, those flags are getting rehung. It's in process. Do not worry. Valerie.
Okay, so I did not know this was supposed to be brief, so bear with me. But, so we're going to be voting on the 8th principle at our annual meeting. The proposed principle reads, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. When I first became aware of this principle, I was puzzled about why it was needed, and this led me to seek out information about what was going on at the denominational level. I pored over the 8th Principle website, attended online meetings about the principles, and participated in online worship services hosted by Blue, Black Lives Unitarian Universalism. I attended virtual UUA conventions the past 2 years, and also participated in our own congregation's Beloved Conversations workshop. I also read the UUA report, Widening the Circle of Concern, which was published in 2020. The UUA commissioned this report after a crisis precipitated by a 2017 hiring decision that eventually resulted in the resignation of the UUA president. If you were around then, you may remember that we had 3 co-presidents after that. Reverend Bill Sinkford, who was a former UUA president, Reverend Sofia Betancourt, who was extensively quoted here today, and Dr. Leon Spencer, a decades-long lay leader who has worked on anti-oppression and anti-racism efforts within the UUA since 1985. All three of these leaders are African American. This says to me that the controversy was too hot to handle. Not only the racial optics, but the fact that a triumvirate was deemed necessary. Reverend Susan Frederick Gray was elected as president of the UUA at the convention that year, and has seemingly done a very good job of treading this treacherous water. It was after that crisis that the Widening the Circle of the Concern was commissioned and published, and it's a document well worth reading. It sheds light on the concerns of ministers, staff, and lay leaders of color, and can be found on the UUA website. After mulling all this over, my thoughts on the eighth principle are as follows, and they are my own. They don't represent any group or consensus. The eighth principle asks us to covenant to work to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions within ourselves and our institutions. To me, this seems like a very inward-focused principle. It's not so much telling us to go out into the world and conquer racism. That's covered in several other principles already, particularly the first, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the second, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and the sixth, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. The eighth principle is more about coming to understand all the subtle ways racism has affected us as individuals and as a religious organization, and working to undo that damage. Part of this work is coming to understand what the nature of that damage is. But this principle is not just about racism. In it, we covenant to dismantle racism and other oppressions. Other impressions is an intriguing phrase which could apply to many things. Classism is the first that comes to mind, but it could also apply to things that in 2022 either don't exist as oppressions or we don't yet recognize as such. Put on your science fiction thinking cap here. So this principle is actually quite broad, as a guiding principle should be. It is an expansive principle. I wish it were not necessary. It should be covered by the 7 principles. But both the history and the current state of affairs in our denomination tell us differently. The brunt of dealing with the remnants of racism within our congregations falls heavily upon the non-white people who are most committed to Unitarian Universalism, those in the ministry and other positions of leadership within the UUA and our congregations. This was made clear in widening the circle of concern. And also, I think it impacts younger people more, those who have not been so conditioned to living in the sea of racism by decades of indoctrination and acculturation. Dismantling racism and other oppressions within ourselves calls us to spiritual growth. A few decades ago, it became common for some people to say, "I don't see race," and for a different group of people to push back against that statement as inauthentic. I wish I could not see race as a defining characteristic of people. It's exhausting, limiting, and sad. The only possible way I can see that happening is if I achieve some degree of enlightenment. And I'm using enlightenment in the Buddhist sense here. So maybe truly engaging with this principle would force me to take my very sporadic meditation practice seriously. The stated goals of this principle are spiritual wholeness and the establishment of a diverse, multicultural, beloved community. Will adopting it get us there? I don't know. I'm not a particularly imaginative or optimistic person, but just because I can't imagine something doesn't mean it can't happen. I certainly never thought I would see a black president of the United States in my lifetime, and yet it happened. People with more vision and faith than I made it happen. So why can't we have a diverse, multicultural, beloved community? Trust the vision. It is a vision worth working for. And more on that, if you want more information about the 8th principle, there is an opportunity May 14th. This is Project Octave. It's a Zoom. It's on via Zoom, May 14th at 2 p.m. I'm sure this will be in your newsletter. And it begins with an interactive game, one more opportunity to prepare for the vote on adopting the 8th principle. This Zoom meeting starts with a fun virtual escape room experience that opens discussion about the 8th principle, is appropriate for adults and youth over the age of 14. Registration required at nancykingsmith@mac.com. And again, I'm sure that's going to be in your newsletters going forward.
Thank you, Valerie. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our concerns this week about the news that has come out from the Supreme Court, the leak from the Supreme Court. As Valerie mentioned, the 8th principle talks about other oppressions. And the news this week about the Supreme Court's intention to overturn Roe versus Wade, we clearly see as another oppression. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that all bodies are sacred. Every person has the right to determine if, when, and how they want to have children, and our values lead us to conclude that all individuals and communities have the right to self-determination, safety, and resources that are necessary for health and sustainability. To assert ownership or authority over the body of another adult is certainly an oppression. As a faith tradition, we are committed to reproductive justice, which espouses the human right to have children, not to have children, to parent the children one has in healthy environments, and to safeguard bodily autonomy and express one's sexuality freely. That is what our faith tradition stands for. The board here is considering a clear statement affirming reproductive rights, but in the meantime, I encourage you to speak out against this ongoing oppression as your conscience and your faith calls you in the week ahead. And one of the intersectional ways that all of this is being addressed is the Poor People's March, and Suzanne Zilber will be downstairs. You have another opportunity today to get your Side with Love t-shirts. You can wear your affiliation loud and proud in distinctive Side with Love yellow, and while you're doing that, Suzanne can tell you anything you need to know about the Poor People's March and how that seeks to address a whole interlocking system of oppressions. A lot happening in our congregation. May you go forth from this place with a spirit of peace and courage, with a willingness to repent or course correct as you need to do, and with a word of hope and compassion for the world around you. And while you're at it, maybe a word of hope and compassion for yourselves too. Go with peace and courage.
Please join me as we extinguish in the reading as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our postlude today is Siyahamba. If you know the song, please sing along, move your body however the Spirit moves you. If you don't know the song, it's in your teal book as number 1030, and you can participate in whatever way feels best to you.